In May of 2006, I went to Guatemala on a service and learning trip with a colleague of mine. She had two faculty observers, myself and another gentleman from another college, and 9 students. And we flew from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Guatemala City. And from Guatemala City, we were picked up in vans and transported to San Lucas Tolliman. Although San Lucas Tolliman does not appear on this map, it is located on the southeast corner of Lake Atitlan. Here's some demographics on San Lucas Tolliman. Here's an aerial shot of the city and the mountains that surround it and the lake that plays a very central part to this community. And although they proclaim themselves to be the most beautiful place in the world, there is unfortunately a lot of things that aren't beautiful about this area, most specifically the poverty. As you saw in the previous statistics slide, 76% of the community lives below the poverty level, and 33% is at extreme poverty, according to United Nations standards. Here you'll see a family's living quarters that's just pieced together with some scrap metal and scrap lumber and even some tarps. And this is where families live. You can see here in this picture that a lot of these living quarters are very close together. However, even in these extreme conditions, the children will run around in the streets, usually with smiles on their face, and they are just beautiful. The reason we went to San Lucas Tolliman was because there was a very well-established mission there, led by a gentleman by the name of Father Greg Schaefer, who, by the way, happens to have Minnesota roots. He's worked at this parish for years, and the mission has established an extensive support system. There are 5 main program areas that the mission supports: education, healthcare, disaster relief, food and land, and housing construction. We were given a short tour of the school, including the library, which, although small, had a philosophy that spoke volumes. The philosophy, as painted on this mural, loosely translates as, "To read is an act of humility. After reading a book, one cannot be the same." The day that we toured the school, the kids were working in the courtyard on some paper mache projects. Do you think that's Winnie the Pooh up there on the table? The mission also supports a local clinic. You'll see here there are individuals waiting outside on benches to get in for an appointment, including this young guy here. The clinic had a children's wing, maternity wing. This is an examination room in obstetrics. You can see the stirrups at the end of the table. Here's another examination room. And as part of this particular clinic, there was also an area devoted specifically to dental care. Guatemala can get a lot of rain, and here you'll see the water rushing right outside of our hotel. And at one point, it's almost covering the entire street. Almost every afternoon that we were there, we got some rain. There have been several disastrous landslides in the area, and here's a photo where a landslide took out an entire portion of the road. The mission has worked on buying land that then gets turned back over to the local farmers, and farming families can work the land and provide for each other and have it go right back to helping them support each other and their community. The mission also supports sustainable agriculture projects. Here, local boys help sort the coffee beans that were grown and harvested right near San Lucas Toloman before they get packaged and distributed all over the world. One of their other land initiatives is a reforestation project. Although we didn't get to learn too much about the project itself, we did spend time at the project center. Here we learned how to make wooden spoons from the leftover wood that comes from the shade trees that shade the coffee plants. You use a machete to cut the wood down, and then you use smaller tools to get the spoon closer to the spoon shape, and then eventually you file and sandpaper them down until it looks like a completed spoon. The spoons are sold, and the money then goes back into the reforestation project. The last program area of the mission is housing and construction, and one of their projects was the development of a new women's center. Although the plans were laid out for this multifaceted center, it was really just in the construction phase, and that's why there was a lot of physical labor that was needed at the time when we were there. So some of our service learning involved actually working on the community well that would be outside of the women's center. And as you can see, the land is really rocky, and so we had to dig out this area that would eventually get filled in with concrete, but at the time we just were hauling dirt from one area to another and trying to clear out those big boulders so that that could become a well. The dirt got hauled over to a different part of the Women's Center landscape because that was going to be turned into a garden area. Some of our other work at the Women's Center dealt with rebar and tying rebar into structural columns that would support the walls and ceilings of the Women's Center. This is a washing station, and it's designed to catch rainwater, and you'll see the roof is slanted inwards, and then it goes down into a large basin. And women used to use the lake to wash their clothes, and that's not real good for the lake. So this was designed to not only be more environmentally sound, but also provide an area where women could do their chores together. Traditionally, gender stereotypes are very strict in Guatemala, and so it is the woman's responsibility to do household chores. And by having a place where they could come together, the idea was that it would help foster a sense of community for these women. The idea was also to have the women be able to come together to work on their crafts, such as the weaving that is done here in this picture. Note that the white and the red colors are the local colors of San Lucas Toloman. It was also expected that maybe these women would teach future generations their skills. A kitchen was also included, not only for a sense of community, but with the goal of hoping to introduce traditional recipes. Western influence has hit Guatemala, and unfortunately the easy preparation comes in plastic. Unfortunately, the garbage disposal system hasn't caught up with the speed and influence of Western culture, and so there's a lot of garbage that ends up collecting in the streets. So the thought was with the Women's Center that maybe some of these traditional meals and recipes could be reintroduced and passed down to help with that problem. So that's just a little bit about the different program areas that we worked on our service learning trip to Guatemala.